right, everybody, I want to welcome you to our webinar today about automating the point-in-time count. My name again is Becky O'Mara, and I'm a Community Impact Advisor with Simtech Solutions. Can I just get a sound check from my team to make sure you can hear me?
I hear you fine.
Great, awesome. So if you want to go to the next slide, just a few housekeeping items that we'll go over. All participants are muted, but if you do have a comment or question, please use the chat feature and we can also unmute you. The webinar is being recorded and we'll be sending out the recording and the slides to all registered attendees. If you didn't register through Eventbrite, you want to make sure you get that recording. Please do go ahead and either put your contact info in the chat or you can send us an email at support@simtechsolutions.com. And you can go on to the next slide. So our agenda today, we're going to tell you just a little bit about us, who we are as a company, and we're going to look at why are we counting for the point-in-time count. There's a lot going on this year. We're also going to do a live demo of our Counting Us and Regional Command Center. And then we're going to talk a little bit about getting ahead of the game with some street outreach data collection. And finally, we'll wrap up with a few lessons learned from last year's point-in-time count. You can go ahead to the next slide. So a little bit about us. Simtech Solutions is a mission-driven for-profit company. We were founded in 1998. For those of you who maybe haven't worked with us before, we are the developers of Counting Us, which is the most widely used app for the annual point-in-time count. We also have the homelessdata.com data warehouse that supports reporting and analysis, and also the data that is displayed visually with our performance dashboards. We're also the developers of Show the Way, which is a street outreach mobile app. And we've also in the past authored key HUD guidance, including the HUD CSV, the comma separated values data exchange format, and some APR report specifications and things like that. Go ahead to the next slide. So jumping into why do we want to count this year, we have a lot of considerations. We all thought maybe last year that COVID would be a thing of the past. By this year, it is not. So it's not a required, unsheltered count year this year. So why do we want to count? You can go ahead to the next slide. So the point-in-time count really is a vital tool for community planning. And for those of you who are on this webinar, you're obviously a little motivated to think about counting this year. So hopefully we don't have to talk you into this too much. But, having those annual trends are so important so you can see how things are impacting your local community, including, the recent eviction moratoriums that are coming to an end. Maybe your community had to skip last year's count because of COVID, so you're not really sure how to allocate your resources. There's lots of new federal funding available. So being able to have that data that's more fresh for making those strategic impact decisions is really going to be important. And also having that geospatial data available for future outreach planning. Unsheltered homelessness, unfortunately, is actually on the rise. We've seen from the latest AHAR from HUD, and knowing where to send your outreach teams, especially everybody is sort of burnt out and feeling a little bit tired, and really being able to maximize where you're sending your teams, making sure you have good coverage for your entire COC's geographic area, and being able to use those resources appropriately, it's really going to be helpful, and it can be informed by a point-in-time count. And also looking at supporting research. Can you go back one more?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. A lot of communities are branching out beyond maybe the HUD required data elements to look at information that can help create connections between persons experiencing homelessness and resources. So examples can include tracking vaccination status or willingness or hesitancy to get vaccinated, looking at your last permanent address, and types of places not meant for habitation as prior living situations. So we can really look more upstream and inform the research into preventive strategies for intervention. Now you can go on to the next slide. And last but not least, this year's COC competition, even though it's not a required year for the unsheltered count, they are offering points to communities who commit to conducting a 2022 unsheltered point-in-time count. They are going to be looking, they say in this year's NOFO that they will be looking at unsheltered and sheltered data for next year's competition. And you also have a point available for doing committing to doing a youth count, and we can support both of those. And with that, we're going to hand things off to Kevin, and he's going to do a live demo of the Counting Us mobile app and Regional Command Center. So it's all yours, Kevin.
All right, thank you much, Becky. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go through the process from where we're at right now, which would be pre-count, and we'll try to see how the setup goes, how we have different features, help volunteers, how the command center goes, and can help you, how the command center can be used to help you navigate your entire COC region so that you can cover as much as you can, given your resources, right, and the volunteers that you have. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and we will start with the volunteer registration portal. Alrighty, so this is one of our features that helps connect things and kind of get ahead of the count by automating the setup for you, right? So you have all these volunteers, some of you have hundreds, some of you may be in the thousands of people that need their accounts, right? It's gonna take a lot of time to get your people set up. If you have to go make accounts for everybody and communicate all that information out to them. So we have one of our features that helps kind of get ahead of that for you. Everything's tailored to what you needed to display. Here's the landing page that we have for our demo purposes. You have your picture, and then you have some basic information about what the point time count is. So this is really your place to put whatever relevant information you need for your community. You can blast this out through emails, have this on your website, or what have you. So again, everything can be customized to what you needed to say. Here's some basic information about what the count is. I'm going to go ahead and go to register. So in the sake of time, I've already filled this out on a separate page, but here's the example of what it is. So we're just collecting some certain fields that we need for your account. Here's your first name, last name, email, your phone number. We'll see how that's useful in the future. And then here's your profile questions, right? So these questions have a standard template that we have developed in order to help navigate how you can assign volunteers to certain regions and make sure that you have good coverage. One big thing would be, do you have transportation? There's a yes or no. Let's see, I'm sorry, this question's already showing. There is dependency, there is a visibility logic. So if you do have reliable transportation, this question pops up. If you do, then would you be willing to volunteer for the pit count and use your vehicle with others, right? That's kind of a concern for COVID. Use that as you guys see fit. Point being, there are questions here that are built in to help navigate how you can group people together. So you can have other questions here as you guys need. Let's go on to the next section. Passive profile would be your deployment center. The deployment centers are how you break up your entire COC region. We have simple example here of central, eastern, southern, northern, and western. You can call them anything you need to locally, however you best describe your certain areas, right? So my main choice as a volunteer is going to be in this northern region. I have some information about where that deployment center is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and select that northern region. And then I'm also willing to go to the central region if the northern region is filled, right? Or if you don't need any more northern region volunteers. So a little caveat on that, right now everything is showing because none of the quotas have been filled. And we'll kind of see that inside of the command center setup in a little bit. So I'm choosing northern region, and then we'll go on to the last bit, which is our volunteer release form. Here on our demo platform, our demo volunteer portal, we have a basic signature field, just your name. We can have links out to your own customized forms that people may need to sign. That's kind of, depends on what you guys have and what you need. We do request that everybody has an emergency contact information entered, and that's just, for their safety and for your safety. And then that's pretty much it for this volunteer portal. So once I hit sign up, the command center is going to see if I already have an account, and if I do, then I'm going to get added to this particular account for this year. Or if not, I'm going to get an account created and then added to this particular account for this upcoming year. So this does get done ahead of time. And then, like I said, with the deployment centers, I'm already going to be automatically added to that northern region. So we'll see that within the command center. All righty. So this does get done pre-count. You can have this up from, as soon as whenever we get you set up until the account goes live. And then we can jump over to the command center, which we're going to start looking at the setup side of things, right? Alrighty. Okay, so again, since we're going through things from front to back, I'm going to kind of skip into some of the functionalities and we'll go back and look at some of the other functionalities. So focusing on the next piece of the setup would be your regions. So this is one of our features that helps set up geographic boundaries for your different areas within your COC, with the goal being to cover each specific area, right? So let's look at the northern region. And this is something that we've gone ahead and set up. So you can see some basic information here. There's 104 census tracts in this particular region. Right now, there is 0 census tracts being covered by teams, and then there's 3 users within this particular region. So if I look at the region geographies, you'll see these are my selected census tracts, and around here for the rest of San Antonio, that's where I'm at right now. You can see that there's different teams or different regions covering those census tracts. But for my northern region, I have all of these selected tracts over here. Since I've already gone ahead and set this up as an example, let me backtrack. Something to help you set this up are some of these map settings on the right. So we have our different census layers. Let's say you need to set your regions up by counties or by different census cities or towns. You can pull up these layers and help build these different shapes, right? One option there. Another option would be using other pit count data. So if you're an existing customer or existing client, you can go ahead and pick your particular activity. So let's say this was pit count 2020. I can just hit apply, and then all of these responses will get populated. As you can see, we're in the demo, so a little bit of a chaotic look, right? But here in San Antonio, we can see here are the specific responses that have been submitted within this area, right? We can use this to define and shape where our census tracts are being covered. Alrighty. So if I flip to the next page, we have our users. You can see here, the pit at simtechsolutions.com is that account that I had used the volunteer registration portal to sign up with. I said I did have a car. I have not previously participated, and I'm going to be individual. I'm going to be by myself. So that was already done for us ahead of time. Now let's look into actually making sure that all of my region is covered, right? I'm going to look at a particular team within that region. And you don't have to use teams. It's just an option for you to subdivide and group users together. Let's say you have people that are already signing up together in a group of 4. Maybe you want to assign them as one team to a specific area. So we can kind of go through that by choosing our geographies for this particular team. So I'll go in and I will choose a couple census tracts down here, and I'm going to finish editing these. And now by this selection, we're saying that test team 1 is going to cover these particular tracts. I can go and use these same map settings that we saw earlier in the region geographies in order to help me shape those areas. But I went ahead and just picked some randomly. So I'll go ahead and go to the users page, and then I'm going to go ahead and find this pit training account, and I'm going to go ahead and add that to the team. Alrighty, so that's from front to back of a volunteer signing up, someone on the command center receiving that volunteer sign up, seeing where that volunteer might be best fit to cover, and then assigning them to that particular area. So now let's kind of jump forward to the actual point in time, right? All that process gets done for your volunteers, for your different areas, and now we're ready to count. So come in the future, I'm on Counting Us, and this is our mobile app that I'm loaded up right now on the web version. This can be downloaded on the App Store, the Google Play Store, and the Apple App Store. And you can actually access the same demo environment by entering the demo key, and we can kind of go over that later. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm the same pit training volunteer that I registered a few months ago, and now I'm ready to count, right? When you first get in here, you'll notice here at the top that we're looking at our pit count demo activity, and here are our surveys. And this is really where you're going to spend the most of your time. Making one note to the bottom tab, You are going to spend most of your time on the surveys. You're going to be collecting these interviews for persons experiencing homelessness. You have your drafts page for any surveys that were in process. You have your map if you just need to see what's going on for your area and try to get to where you need to be covering. So you can see here is my current location, and these 4 census tracts that I selected earlier in the command center are shown within the app here. We can go over to the My Count section. This is more of like a checkup to make sure that things are going through correctly. This button here just tells you that you completed 50 surveys or what have you. And this region and team assignment gives you some information saying that I'm part of the northern region and I'm assigned to test team 1. Alrighty, and then here's some helpful hints on this last tab. So going through the surveys, this is going to be how we do the point time census count. We will look at our homeless survey, that is for our unsheltered population first. We have options of doing English and Spanish. The Spanish translations were so graciously provided by one of our clients. If you guys have other Spanish translations that might fit better for your community, you can let us know. I'm going to go ahead and just click English. Going to be asked if this is going to be for an individual or for a household, and that just helps us group together the point time survey submissions. So I'm going to do an individual survey. The map will then show up with your current location. Let's say location's off or it's an approximate location. We do recommend that you go into your phone settings and set the precise location, and we'll see why that's important for the geospatial recording piece. But you also have the ability to just drag and drop your pin. So let's say I'm just over here, and I'm still within my region. So I'm hitting next, and here's our surveys. So all of these surveys are a set of questions that we have developed that are in line with the HUD guidance, and we have the ability to add other questions, and we'll see that. But the very first question is, have you already been interviewed for the point time count? And this is important because oftentimes you may have people that are interviewed and we only need them once, right? So we'll just say no. And then the main question is going to determine whether or not you are truly experiencing homelessness as per the HUD definition. I'll go ahead and hit abandoned building, and then this next set of questions pops up, and that is a use case or no, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make the point that there's conditional logic built into our surveys, and we can apply that to any of these questions. So if you are sleeping at one of the locations that indicate you are experiencing homelessness, this next set of questions will show up. If I choose something else, such as an emergency shelter, we do have all of those questions hidden so that we don't go forth and continue with the survey, because we're not actually counting this person for this point in time count. Alrighty, so you can notice here are our required questions being indicated. Here are ones that are not. And I'll kind of go through and skip past down to this COVID-19 question. So I think if you're familiar with the HUD reporting, you might recognize some of these other questions about your homelessness history, but this is one that's an example of a custom question. So just like the volunteer portal can be customized, the surveys can be customized to any questions that you have locally that you might need to ask. This is one that's just kind of random, or not random, but not related to something. So you're just asking, but let's say I am experiencing homelessness because of COVID. We can have other questions show up that kind of dig into that and help ask the specific things that you need locally. Alrighty, so here's your disabilities as per the HUD guidance. And we do have one question here about miracle messages, and I think we will touch on that later. Alrighty, so at the very end of this survey, you have two options. You can either submit it like this, or you can hit save draft. You can always save a draft whenever you need to, and we can see how that looks. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and go over to those drafts, and then we will see here. Right now, this draft was just started a few minutes ago. I will go ahead and open it back up, and then here's exactly what we had submitted. So if you run into a situation where you're called away, or you need to take a break with some of these questions and build more rapport or what have you, you can always save that draft and come back to it. Sometimes you may lose internet connection. You can save the draft for that reason as well, and then quickly scan through things and go ahead and hit submit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alrighty, so that's our little confirmation message, and then we'll go back and rinse and repeat. Alrighty, so in a nutshell, that's counting us. So let's go back into the command center and kind of look at how things are coming in during the point in time count. Alrighty, so here we go. Here's a summary dashboard. Again, a lot of people have this up on the TV screen. You can see what's coming in. It's trying to give you a bird's eye view about what's happening and give you quick links to fix things on the fly. So you can see here we have 1199 total surveys, 855 are interviews, 344 observations, and we have a good ratio there for interviews to observations. If you notice that you have a ton of observations, maybe that's something you want to look into and see why people are just submitting observations as opposed to getting those actual full surveys in. On the right, you'll notice some data quality metrics. So if you notice a lot of people are entering, don't know for gender, maybe you can see if that's a particular set of volunteers that may need some assistance on how to ask that question properly or what have you. Then we'll go on to the main portion of the responses, which gives us our map view and our list view. So if I go ahead and hit refresh, I will see this new survey that was just entered by Pitt Training, and they are part of the Northern region. So we can go ahead and go back into that survey, and I can do a quick scan at any point in time. I can take a look at where that location is. Let's say Pitt Training gave me a call, and I'm over at the command center and said, hey, my location is actually coming in wrong. Could you update that for me? That can be done right here by changing the location, as well as any updates to the data. Let's see. So yeah, that's pretty much how you can open up a response and try to catch things in real time. You're not always going to be able to do that, but it is nice to get ahead of things instead of coming back to things a week later or 2 weeks later and trying to fix things when you don't know exactly what might have happened. So going on to the map view, here's going to be where all of our geospatial data is coming in. And you can see here for all of San Antonio, we have these interviews and observation pins for everywhere that people have gone so far. And then on the right of the map settings, we have our different ways that we can help kind of make sure we're getting our correct coverage, right? So we have our layers, and we can go down to our overlays, and we can look at our regions. And this shows us our coverage areas for all of our regions. And here's my northern region covering this particular area. If I wanted to drill down into that, I could say my regions and teams, and then I could try to see who's covering this particular area and see, okay, why is this interview outside of your region, what have you. So another tool that can help you real time to really get into that data quality and make sure that people are going where they need to be and making sure that you have the right counts. Alrighty, I'm going to take a quick pause and ask my team if there's anything else I should go over, because there's quite a bit of functionality.
We did get a question about how to add and remove census tracts from the town team areas. So I don't know if it's a quick way to show just clicking on the map and explain that, but it might maybe help it with visual.
Yep. So if you need to go back to the team at any point in time, you can go back and select this test team 1. I can go ahead and edit these geographies, and I can click away this particular tract right here, and I can, let's just say, add this tract over here. So once we do that, it's updated here, and if I were to flip back over to counting us, that would be reflected in the map view for this anybody assigned to this team. The same thing would apply to the region geography here. If you were to say that the northern region shouldn't be covering, let's say, this tract, for example, and that's how you can quickly change the covered areas for regions and teams. There is one more area to exclude tracts, and that's going to be kind of any tracts that you know that just can't be accessed, like if they're in a restricted area or what have you, and they should basically be excluded from your COC coverage. That can also be done by taking them out of your map entirely.
Kevin, can you show the settings page 2, I think that's helpful for people to see the quotas and how that works in with the volunteer registration.
So the settings page of the region. Yes. Alrighty. So I'm inside of my northern region, and these are your settings that do link up to the volunteer registration portal, like Matt was saying. We have here a simple check mark for you to manually control should this region show up in my volunteer portal. I can hit no. We also have these quotas. So right here, there's 100 people as a volunteer quota. Once we have 100 users assigned to the northern region will drop off of the volunteer portal as an option. So to flip over to that, just to make sure I'm linking everything correctly, inside of this drop-down list, the northern region would not be there, and then the northern region would not be here as well. So nobody just has the option of choosing that. Going back to the settings, here's your colors. You can change that as you guys need. We have our deployment center information. As you saw on the volunteer portal, here's an address for this particular deployment center. Then we also have region admin. So going over to the region admin functionality, this is an elevated privilege for the command center where you can designate users to have manager access over their particular region. So they will have the ability to log into the command center and only see information that's relevant to their region. They can only manage users within their region. They can manage the coverage areas, and they can manage the responses within their region. So this is a way to grant access and kind of delineate the separations of duties based off your region. So if you have different partnerships with different areas, you can set them up here, and then they'll have access to this settings page, this entire region functionality, as well as this response map with responses only from their region.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, also the ability to run reports and APRs on a regional level, I think is pretty helpful, especially for the larger community. So the idea is you're basically spreading out the responsibilities. So say you have a big COC, we work with 14 balance of state COCs. It's really hard for them to have centralized oversight on their own, so they break it up into smaller parts. I think the Texas Balance of State is on the call, and you can thank them for some of this development. With we got 250 some odd counties, they needed to be able to slice and dice it up a little bit more to make it manageable. So, by having the region, the functionality in play, you can cut it up into manageable bite-sized chunks. You're still providing oversight over the whole count, but you're just having help along the way. And then beyond the regions, you still have teams, and then you have the volunteers themselves. So the idea is it's spreading out the responsibility. It's not all on your back to do the work. So I don't know if there's anything else, Kevin, you wanted to hit on. If you wanted to jump back over to the slide deck, we can talk about geographic sampling enumeration.
Yep, that sounds good. Just on that note of reports, here's our quick look at the HUD PIT reports. We have our different options for the unsheltered, sheltered, both of them combined. So that is something that you may have seen in the Counting Us app. We have a sheltered survey. This allows you to select the project, so you can use Counting Us for both your unsheltered count and your sheltered count. Sometimes HMIS data is out of sync, so it's good to have something that's just a quick and easy survey. There's other ways for us to combine that data from HMIS with the unsheltered count. We can talk about that later. But you see here some additional options. The demographic extrapolation is included with the report so that you can fill in those missing error rates wherever HUD's guidance allows, if it's 80% or higher. We also have the sampling option, which Matt will go into shortly. And here is that region geography filter. So if I wanted to run the report just for the northern region, I would just do that. It would filter my records accordingly, and then I'd be able to produce a report that would show all of these blue census tracts at the very top, all within the HUD spec for their report. So now I will pause my sharing and throw it back to the slide deck.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that before you do, just to know too that you can also apply other filters. So say you wanted to see veterans across your entire COC, and then you wanted to do it just for a subregion, you can, actually, the combination of both of them. So you want to know how many veterans are in each region. You can run a point in time report just for veterans, for example, or by race, or by, any of these filters that Kevin's showing. So when you take the geospatial on top of the data filtering, there's a lot more power there. And then also beyond here, there's we have custom filters for your custom questions, as well as the ability to filter based on labels that you can assign to, or tags that you can assign to your surveys that come in. So there's definitely some tools to play with. And the other side of it too is all this data can be exported into a CSV format. So if you don't like our reporting output, if you want to do some of your own analysis, you can do that.
So like Matt's saying, all these filters can be applied. You can run the reports off of them. You can view them on the map, and you can also view the list view. So for my filters, I'm looking at any veteran that has a developmental disability, and I can see here my 40 responses that meet those criteria. And we can run the reports off of these specific 40 if we needed to.
Okay, let me go back into sharing. So overview of all the updates, that have happened recently. So these are right here. We did go through a lot of those, but again, just kind of a recap here. I'm not going to go through them all together. The one that we touched on briefly in the survey that I just wanted to put a nod in here for is the family unification option. It's totally free. We work with a nonprofit called Miracle Messages. And it's basically that question: do you have anyone in your life that you'd like to be reunited with? It's along those lines. I might not have it exactly. And if they say yes, then we ask for follow-on details. And with consent, we share that information back to this nonprofit. And they have digital detectives that will look to try to match that person back up with their loved ones. We did have a few communities sign on for it last year, and we did have some pretty cool stories, success stories of people that were reunited. Some virtually. One gentleman was homeless for over 30 years, got reunited with his mom, met his grandkids for the first time. So we've had, it's turned the point in time count from just a reporting exercise to an opportunity to help people. So just to be aware of that. And we also not really highlighted here, for those of you that are interested in using Show the Way or are using Show the Way, that's our outreach app. We can use the data gathered from the app throughout the year to help cut down the length of the surveys for volunteers if a record already exists. So we'll share that a little bit as well. So anyway, that's a high level. Again, this is the Spanish surveys too. So it's free thing, but if you don't want it, Spanish, for example, is not spoken frequently in your area. Just don't check it off. If you do want it, just the contract has the details, and we use that to help set you up the right way. So and some people aren't comfortable with working with a third party. They're like, no, we're adding link to the survey. So if you don't want the Miracle Messages survey, just don't check it off. And if you're curious and you want to follow a meeting to get more details, just, that's what we're here for. So, we want to get this right for you. So, I'm gonna play, this is an overview of how we can use the Show the Way tech to spread out the count, basically. All right. Thanks, Becky, for putting that together. That last one, the last reason is the big one. We're trying to help people. I mean, it's hard to help people if you don't know who they are. So we're spreading out the work of the point in time count by using Show the Way year round, ideally, curating those by name lists, working with people, you know, building up their story over time, not just from someone you just met 5 minutes ago asking those tough questions. And then that way too, we can direct the work of the volunteers. And then the 2 feed off each other, because you have the point in time data where people are trying to ideally do a full canvas of the area that might identify spots that people are hidden. And they can go use that data to inform where to send street outreach, and vice versa. You're using the work of street outreach throughout the year to make sure you have enough volunteers for especially your high probability areas, which I'm going to talk about in a second. What does that mean, high probability area? So we can use the known locations surveys to log places where people are experiencing homelessness. That is an option that's free, and so you can as soon as you sign up for 2022, if you want the known location survey, just the free option to indicate to include it. People can go out, you can guide outreach volunteers, whomever, to go out and start dropping pinpoints saying there are people in this location. And it's a very simple question. It's how many people do you believe experiencing homelessness are in this location? And that's it. We're not capturing information about the people as of yet for that approach. And that, again, you're using that to allocate resources ahead of time. So there's that aspect. And then the other one is the ongoing work of street outreach. And you can use both. So you can have ongoing work of street outreach, doing their thing day to day. There's certain areas they hit regularly because they're high density and people in need. Whereas the own location survey could be people in their own neighborhoods, volunteers, people you work with, people, staff at nonprofits, staff at the county. Not necessarily engaging people, but again, just like, oh, there's someone here. We make sure we go back here. And the other part to show the way, just to throw it out there, we do have tools for encampment management. It is the client level data collection, HUD compliant data capture, geospatial. But the bigger thing is it supports coordination of care between outreach providers in a person-centered, approach. It's not just focused on HUD data capture. It's trying to help the person and in capturing the data elements as a byproduct of that. So, but if you ever want a demo or something like that's a separate conversation, but just knowing that that's available for you. But the sampling and enumeration conversation. So just high level, what this allows you to do if you need it. So say you're starved of resources, maybe because of COVID, people are hesitant to come out and work together, or you have one of those large COCs, a balance of state especially, and there's no way you can canvas the entire geography. And maybe up until now, you've been just like doing what you can with what you have, but in reality, there's parts of the COC that you're just not getting to. Well, you're not really doing a true count, and you're probably underrepresenting your overall, unless you're having a way to back into those areas that aren't canvassed and back in counts. So what geographic sampling was? The sampling enumeration and the geographic sampling enumeration. Let me talk about those, break those down first. But the point of it is you can get by with less resources and create a statistically reliable count using a couple of different approaches. So the census, as you can imagine, is a count and enumeration of the entire area. You're trying to canvass everything. You're trying to actually survey everyone as best as you can. All right, so there really isn't, with a sample, you're just doing a portion of that, and then you're doing extrapolation. So, and you can do it different ways. You can interview 1 out of 10 people, and you take those results, and you're going to apply that to everyone else that you observed. Maybe definitely try to confirm their homeless status if that's the only thing you're going to do, and ideally that you do it in a way that someone else isn't going to be counting that same person. So maybe it's a blitz count, everyone's got their regions, et cetera, or you ask someone, has anyone engaged you yet for the count? But the point of the sampling approach is you could do a subset and then extrapolate for the whole. So there's the 1 out of 10 approach, and there's another option that HUD is endorsing now, which we've been doing for several years, especially we started with the state of Connecticut, doing a statewide count for them. Again, limited resources, how are we going to pull this off? And that's geographic sampling and enumeration. And what geographic sampling enumeration allows you to do, as in the case of Connecticut, is only canvass a portion of the area. So for Connecticut, as an example, we're able to get by with canvassing less than 40% of the state. So that, if you think about it that way, that means 60% of the state can be ignored. So we don't need volunteers. We don't need, all that, infrastructure to pull it off. We just whittled it down, the universe of what we need to work with by 60%, which is pretty amazing. And the way it works is leaning on stats. So for those of you that took stats class or familiar with stats, there are certain things called confidence intervals, confidence levels that we can basically look at to say, does this methodology have rigor? Is what we're putting forward to HUD something that we can stand behind and say this is reliable? And part of that is having a proper setup. So what we do is we have the data mechanism to handle the sampling and enumeration, but there's some planning up front. And one of the things that we need to know first is what are your certainty areas? What are your high probability areas where you're pretty darn sure that someone's going to be experiencing homelessness? And that's a broad question. So like, how do you back into that? Well, we have 4 different tools available for us right now for determining what those high probability areas are. We really should try to send someone to cover those areas. And what we try to do is we try to focus on the areas that should be covered. We know people are going to be there. And then we do a random sample of all the other areas. So that randomness is what provides the rigor. So we can look at last year's point in time counts or the year before as a data source. You can use data from Show the Way, which is the tool we just talked about, the ongoing Worker Street outreach, to say, yeah, there's people here, because we've done outreach throughout the year and we constantly see people here. You can use the known location survey, that free option that we mentioned, between now and the count, drop pinpoints on the map. And if there's pinpoints there, we can basically say, well, we believe there's going to be people there for the point in time count because we saw them recently in that same area. If you don't have the luxury of using prior data sets, or you want something to complement that, one of the things that we also look to use is housing rent burden. So there is research that's done that proves that there's a correlation between housing rent burden, which is basically a composition of area median income, comparing that to fair market rent. And in areas where it's over, I believe it's 34%, is a higher prevalence rate of homelessness. So that's using census data. And because everything we do is based on census tracts, we can pull in data for those tracts and say, okay, this area is above that or below that. So once you have the high probability areas, then yeah, we can go to town and set up the sampling. And I'll show you how that works. And there's some more details for this kind of conversation. If it's especially something you're not used to, we would set up a separate call, walk you through it, talk through whether or not it will work for your area. Everyone's got constraints, and so we're trying to work around those and try to figure it out together. So this is the random sampling of an assignment of those tracks is what I'm showing you now. That's pretty much it. It's basically, so in the top left corner, you see the total areas, 833 tracks. You've got 229 areas total that are sampled, with 78 of them being high probability areas. So we can set a confidence interval, and then that will tell us how many randomly low probability tracks are to be randomly sampled. And that is it. Any questions that came in about that?
Not about sampling, but there is a question about pricing. I was just about to type in, but if you want to go ahead and talk about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So pricing it's a formula. It's not exact, like here's your cost. And really what it comes down to is we try to right size our offering. And so the formula is, we'll give you a price if you ask for it. You just tell us what your COC you're coming from, and we'll get it back to you. But just so you're aware, and by doing that, you can just you can just email team@simtechsolutions.com, and one of us will get back to that. That's one way to do it, or pit@simtechsolutions.com. But it's based on a few factors. It's your HUD annual renewal demand. It's your unsheltered count, the most recent unsheltered count data. And we also have a little bit of adjustment factor for balance of state COCs, just because there's a little bit more involved with them. So that's the high level of the formula. And anyone that's worked with us in the past, we really try to make sure that there's no surprises on the pricing. So we really try to keep the pricing as flat as possible from year to year. Okay, will do. Yeah, and if anyone else wants the price estimate or a sample agreement, you feel free to use the chat too, and we can do that, or you can direct message us as well.
Okay. So I think I'm taking it from here.
Yeah.
Great. So we did promise to share some strategies for overcoming some challenges faced with COVID-19 from some of the communities that we worked with last year. So we're going to do that next. If you want to go on to the next slide, Matt. So we did have quite a few communities who did successfully count last year, even though it was a very unusual environment, and we were all kind of learning as we go and trying to be responsive and adaptive to ever-changing CDC guidance and HUD guidance, and really on-the-ground realities that were changing for communities daily, with new data coming out from their local communities and new guidelines and things like that. So it was pretty interesting, but there were a few, I wouldn't call them quite best practices, maybe that's a little bit too fine of a point, but there were some really great strategies that came out of last year that we'd like to share. Last year, we had a lot of communities who really relied on their street outreach teams, those first responders and providers, rather than maybe going to the typical volunteer pool that they may have used in the past. And this was helpful, especially for those who use the known location survey as part of their pre-count planning, to try to see where they should send those teams and really hone in on using those volunteer or provider resources effectively. We have heard that this year, some of the providers are feeling a little burned out, and everybody's tired, and it's no-flow season. So there may be adjustments that need to be made this year to account for that. But with vaccinations more readily available, and we've learned a lot over the past year, we may be able to see more of a mix this year. But that was one strategy that a lot of communities used last year. Also, adjustments to the volunteer registration process. So having volunteers sign up in their groups. I think the term we used last year was sort of COVID bubbles at that point, and really having people that maybe were in your work group or a household signing up together, making sure that you were comfortable being around those people. It really seemed to help. And also reducing the team size, especially if you're going to be in a car together for any amount of time. And actually, some communities just said we're not doing cars this year. Everybody's kind of dispersing on foot, and it depended on your local situation and what you felt comfortable with, and the volunteers as well. Looking at trying to keep the surveys as brief as possible, there was some HUD guidance specifically for last year. We are keeping an eye out for what they're going to put out for this year, but keeping it just to those required data points, using observations if you really felt like it was an unsafe situation for you to be in close proximity to someone for any amount of time, but just trying to make sure you're capturing the data that you actually need for that particular survey. And then looking at, during virtual planning, training, and dispatch, we're on Zoom now. It's kind of taken over the world, I think, in a lot of ways with virtual meetings, and we may have a little bit of fatigue from that, but it really is an effective way to get a lot of information out to a lot of people without gathering everyone together in person. So that was for planning meetings and trainings, and then also doing the dispatch more virtually. We do have the capability, if you use our region and teams feature that Kevin showed you, you can put in a dispatch location, and making sure that the team leads know that location ahead of time, and we can provide you with the names and contact information of everybody on your team. And then you can say, okay, guys, we're going to meet up here and head out there, instead of gathering everybody into a local city hall or convention center or a gym or something where you have all of the teams together in one place. It just really worked better to do for that remote dispatch. And then also looking at extending the count. This is a best practice of the youth count. And again, pending the HUD guidance, there are some, things to think about. You don't want to, if you have a more transient population, people are moving around a lot, you want to be really careful that you're avoiding duplication and things like that. But breaking up, if you have a local area where you can have different geographies covered on different days and things like that, that can also be a strategy for just spacing it out and spacing out the people as well who are actually doing your count. And a few tools, you can stay on this slide, but a few tools that might help you out in the command center. We do have a deduplication through Amazon Glue available within the command center. So if someone does happen to have been counted more than once, you can actually run that over a specific person or over your entire data set, and it will pull together common personal identifiers, and you can say, yes, this is the same person, and archive one of those results and keep one active, or you can say, no, these are two different people. So that can be a tool that can help with that kind of concern mitigation as well. Also, the strategies of, what Matt was just talking about with the sampling and enumeration, and then also doing your bulk of your data collection ahead of time, spread out over time with smaller teams with street outreach data would also be effective strategies when you're thinking about doing a count during COVID. And I think that just about covers that. So we did save some time for Q&A if anybody has questions. I'm not sure if any have come through the chat or anything that you'd like to see again from Counting Us or the Regional Command Center. We'd be happy to go through that. I did want to mention too that Counting Us, can be downloaded on Google Play or the App Store from Apple, or also the web version, as Kevin shared. We do also have the sheltered survey we talked about a little bit. And a feature I love about that is you can actually put the address of your shelter providers in the command center, and then they actually skip that location confirmation screen when they're going through the survey. And that can just be such a huge time saver for your shelter providers. And you also make sure you're not catching somebody who's working remotely from home accidentally putting in their wrong location for that. So that's a neat feature as well. And we also have the opportunity to do test submissions. So when we were looking live at Counting Us, there was that yellow bar across the top. So any surveys that come in during that period are not included in your actual count data, but once you make it active or go live during your count, then those submissions are part of your full count data. So that's also a great tip for virtual training and remote training, that people can download the app and go ahead and create an account. They get the setup key that ties their submissions to your local data store, and then they can go ahead and start practicing and getting familiar with the app, which can also help mitigate some of those concerns during the count too. So I know I didn't really pause for questions. I just wanted to make sure I threw that in there, but did anything come in?
Yeah, Mary had reached out, and good to hear from you, Mary, from Massachusetts, my old state, asking about Show the Way. And so just to be clear, Show the Way is a different product. It's year round at outreach, and it's really based on the number of outreach providers that you have, and so that the pricing is it's different. And it also allows for public officials to also be part of the coordinated entry process, but more focused on the streets. The free benefit of it, if you already use both Show the Way and Counting Us, is that we will do that data integration for you. So if you already have data, in Show the Way year round, if you do get a hit when a volunteer is working with someone of a record that already exists, they're just done. They don't have to ask additional questions, because ideally the outreach have already done that for them. So yeah, if you're to use both, that's a free part of it, but yeah, it's a separate offering. It's based on what you have for staff. But good to hear from you. And I gotta say, like high level, we've been doing this work, for 20 years now, and it's really cool to see some of the same faces on this. And glad to see that you're all still chugging along. So, thanks for joining us and for supporting us throughout the years. It's been good working with you. And to the new people too, we welcome you into the fold. And I think that's another thing is we try to build a community, and we've got some cool things coming up that we'll be doing these monthly webinars. So if you sign on, we're going to start focusing on a little bit more on the planning side next, and then what to do during the count, and then there's a post count. How to clean up data and get that report into HUD so you can move on to other things in your life. Right. So just a heads up that those will be coming. But again, I just wanted to just give a shout out to some of the people on the panel that have joined us for today. So and thank you, Becky, for all the work you did on putting this slide deck together. I gotta say, I love all the animations and everything that you do. And for Kevin for giving the demo.
Thanks. Appreciate that. If you want to actually go to the next slide, it will take our last couple minutes and share. We do have resources available that we will share. We'll get the recording and the slide deck out to y'all. But our pointtime.info has a wealth of information there. There's more detail about all the features we shared today, as well as training videos, instructional videos, past webinars if you want to get sneak peeks about some of the features that we'll be looking at. And then also the HUD Exchange information and CDC guidance that is still active if you're looking ahead to that kind of information. So we'll be sure to get that out to you. And then finally, as Matt was just talking about, our framework to end homelessness, we do have, besides counting us and show the way our homeless data warehouse, just want to make sure you all are aware of that. And if anyone would like more information about any of those, you can definitely contact us. And I think we have the link for contacting us on the last slide, and that will just about wrap us up.
Yeah. Yep, contact's right there. If for those of you that are going through the NOFA rating and ranking, the warehouse part could have saved your butts this year. So think about it for next year, because I know you're all like, everyone's trying to keep their head above water, but we can reach out sometime, and it's ongoing evaluation of how your providers are doing. We have scorecards to help support that, and dashboards as well, to make sure that that you're doing the most with the money that HUD gives you. So just another plug of how else we can help. But and if you have ideas of things that we're not doing, let us know too. So if you get suggestions, feedback, or anything of our existing products, or maybe products that we should think about working that would help build out that framework of how we help people, we're all ears. But with that, feel free to reach out if you want your own demo, if you want your own conversation, you got some struggles that we can help out with. We'd love to be able to support the work. So, but thanks again. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy.